Hello and welcome to yet another commentary from King's Comments. And today we're going to discuss some of the latest developments happening on the battlefield in regards to the Russia-Ukraine war. And today we're going to be talking about two specific areas. One is the Donetsk area and the second is the Kursk area. So let's get into it. In the Donetsk area, since the last time we did our audio message, a lot has transpired and it's all been bad for Ukraine. What we've been seeing on the battlefield, and this is on the basis of various military summary channels, is that Ukrainian soldiers have been fleeing, captured, or dying in large amounts in this area. The Russians have captured a significant amount of land. In fact, one of the latest captures is an area called Ugledar, a city called Ugledar, which is a high point city, a city that was once part of the Ukrainian supply chain in terms of resupply, ammunition, you name it, in terms of maintaining a presence for the Ukrainian military in the Donetsk area. And now that city, after 2 years, has been finally taken. And that's a significant move because of its ability to be able to act as a vantage point in other areas such as Pokrovsk, in other areas of the Donetsk. But what this basically does for the Russian military is that it primarily acts right now as an important aspect for them to be able to take over what's left of the Donetsk area that's still under Ukrainian control. Cities like Kramatorsk, for example, or Pokrovsk, which is another city that's likely to fall here quickly because it's within 5 kilometers of the area that the Russians are operating in. So this is significant. The Ukrainians are on their back foot. One has to think that the reason for the quick collapse in the Donetsk area, just like what happened in Luhansk, is the fact that the Russian military has a significant advantage in men, material, and morale. And the kinds of soldiers that are being transferred to the front are not the same soldiers that were back in 2022. What we're noticing is that if you take a look at the conscription, forced conscription in many cases in Ukraine, many of those soldiers don't have the will to fight, don't want to fight, and are quick to flee, quick to surrender, quick to leave as fast as possible. Of course, there's been a significant upgrade in the way the Russian military has used its battlefield tactics. What we've noticed from the Russian military is the same old doctrine, which is encirclement, the doctrine of encirclement, creating cauldrons, pincer movements. And this is basically what's transpired in the Donetsk area with the fall of Ugledar, with Russian troops pounding their way through Toretsk and moving toward Pokrovsk and taking the outer areas of Pokrovsk. We're starting to see a major catastrophe taking place for the Ukrainians in Donetsk. And this can literally lead to the Dnieper River because there really isn't that much in the way of resistance beyond Kramatorsk. And right now, in terms of what the Donetsk area is going to look like, this creates a real problem for the Ukrainians in the Zaporozhye region, because it means that their forces could be encircled completely. And this is just bad news for a military or an army that has lost hundreds of thousands of men without the ability to be able to replace those men. And again, we talked earlier in many of our audio messages about the problem that Ukraine has with manpower, and that material and weapons were a secondary issue. But what we're finding out now is that the Russians are degrading their armor, they're degrading their military hardware, the Ukrainian military hardware, daily, and the bombings have been substantive. One of the military channels talked about 120 bombing campaigns happening a day round the clock. in the Donetsk area. And it was thought that the Kursk campaign would be able to move many of the Russian units that were positioned in that area to the Kursk area, which would allow for a little bit more of a pause or break in the offensive. But that simply has not happened. The Russians are continuing their route in the Donetsk Zaporozhye region, and encirclement after encirclement after cauldron is now taking place. And the amount of land that's now being taken is no longer what I'd like to call measured. I remember some time ago using that word measured to describe the Russian offensive that originally began in September not September, I should say, but early on this year, in the summer of this year. And what we're seeing right now is no longer measured. This is a massive scale advance with significant amount of troops, significant amount of commitment to eliminating hardware, eliminating the resources of the Ukrainian military, their energy infrastructure, everything that's associated with it. And clearly what we're seeing right now is the goals of this special military operation being completely fulfilled within the aspect of these four provinces. That includes Crimea, of course. So when we talk about where Ukraine is winning or where there would be an opportunity for Ukraine to do well, there isn't anywhere on the battlefield right now where they're doing well. There's significant pressure in the Kharkiv area, significant pressure in Volchansk, excuse me, with limited forces. And this is creating a major problem, as I said before, with respect to materiel. Now, let's just talk about Kursk for a moment. On August the 6th of 2024, we talked about in our audio message how the Ukrainian military went in there with maybe 40,000 men with armor, and they wanted to establish more than just a bridgehead. They wanted to take over a nuclear power plant. They wanted to create a buffer zone, and they wanted to be able to have some leverage capabilities with respect to a peace plan that they were floating. And that leverage would be significant in terms of maybe trading that land for land that the Russians had already taken. Well, clearly that objective has failed, because in the short period of time that incursion took place, and I wouldn't call it an incursion, excuse me, I wouldn't call it an incursion with that amount of men and materiel, foreign mercenaries included. What has happened is about 25,000 Ukrainians have been eliminated by the Russian aerospace forces and Russian military. The Akhmat special forces, the Chechen special forces, have been assigned this particular detail. And what has happened since August the 6th has been a protracted bombardment by the Russian aerospace forces, eliminating armor, any armor that could be a problem for the Russian forces. And what has also happened is a Russian counterattack, where the Russians are now taking villages and villages and villages away from the Ukrainians where they had initially advanced. And we're getting to the point now where that buffer zone will probably be completely eliminated by the end of October, because of the fact that the Ukrainians don't have enough armor, don't have enough soldiers, don't have enough weapons, and as quickly as they might have gotten weapons, they're being destroyed. So the issue with Ukraine remains the same. It's a problem of resupply, it's a problem of men and materiel, and the Russians are controlling all of the major roads. Again, what's happening in Kursk is a function of what is basically happening in the Donetsk, in the Kupiansk area, which is a situation of not controlling major roads, not having the ability to control the air. We talked about how the F-16s were supposed to be, quote unquote, a game changer. The West at least believed that it could be. And what we're finding out very quickly is that those F-16s have been destroyed. At least the ones that are flying have been destroyed. The pilots either killed, captured, or moved on. So things have not gone as planned. Now, from the geopolitical narrative based off of the battlefield right now, one of the things that's become very clear is that Ukraine is trying to float some form of peace plan, a second peace plan, or trying to float something that gives them some face. But right now, because of the Russian advances in the Kursk and Russia's decision that they no longer wish to pursue that narrative with the current Ukrainian regime, I think it's pretty clear based off of some principles right now that the situation is only going to get worse for Zelensky and the regime in Kiev. It's not looking good at all. They're losing in Donetsk. They've lost in Luhansk. Zaporozhye is being rolled up. They're losing in Kursk badly now. And in terms of men and material, that problem's only getting worse and worse and worse. Their energy infrastructure coming up on winter is completely been depleted, with rolling blackouts in major cities across Western Ukraine. And we're going to see, and I believe this, I think we're going to see and could see a major Russian incursion directly where the Kursk incursion came from, leaving Kiev completely exposed to significant Russian attack. And that could actually happen only because of the fact that they took that chance of trying to take the nuclear power plant in the Kursk area, and also taking that chance or risk of trying to cede land in the Kursk area if they were successful for land that the Russians had already taken in the Donetsk area as well. All of the things that Zelensky had wished to do have all failed, and right now things are just not looking good. So what about the rest of the world? Well, right now what we're seeing is what I like to call war wariness from most of the countries around the world. Even Ukraine's allies are reticent about sending money because they don't have any left. And they're also reticent about military armor. They don't have any left. An issue that has been coming up in Europe is that all of the stocks, current stocks of military supplies, have been basically completely shrunk within the countries of NATO, because they've all given them to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians have seen all of that armor go up in smoke fairly quickly as soon as they hit the battlefield. In fact, in a lot of cases, many of those same pieces of armor don't actually end up on the battlefield because they're typically destroyed en route by, if they're taking trains or whatever the case may be, the Russian aerospace forces eliminate them. So again, what is likely to happen here? Well, there's any number of things that are likely to happen, but it's pretty clear that the Western media, the Western press, they're not talking about Ugledar, they're not talking about the Russian advances, they're not talking about Kursk, they're not talking about any of those things because they realize that the Russians have basically won this war, and they have to find a way to save face moving forward. So we've got a lot to look at here in the coming future with respect to what the end game is with respect to this war. There's been talk about using long-range missiles to strike Russia. Obviously, the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, has offered stern warnings to the West for those kinds of ideas or thoughts. And I think the West, as much as they may like to saber rattle, knows that there's no bluffing with that, and they understand the ramifications of doing something like that. And this is why the United States specifically is reticent to do anything like that, or to at least give Zelensky the ability to do that. One thing I will say is that the West right now is extremely desperate. The economics of this has really hurt Europe. It's fractured NATO. It's fractured the European Union in ways that I don't think that will allow it to be any more dominant. And it's creating a real problem with their ability to be able to deal with a host of other issues. Many of those issues are directly related to what's happening with the war with Israel and Hezbollah and Iran. These are all things that are somewhat interrelated because of the issues directly related to BRICS and issues directly related to Russia's interest in that area, China's interest in that area. All of this is coming full circle. So we'll be watching what happens here very shortly, and we'll be discussing some of the new developments as it happens. The one thing that I'm trying to do here is to give things some time to let the fog of war sort of melt away, to see what's happening. Because typically what happens on this battlefield right now is we're seeing a lot of change that's happening quickly. And that change that's happening quickly has a tendency to you don't see it until maybe days after, because that change that you just saw is manifesting itself by new change. And the Russian military, as I said before, is moving so fast that a lot of the developments are a week old, or sometimes are days old, and they can't always be kept up with. And we're talking about specifically geolocations, where mappers are trying to geolocate where the Russians are putting up their flags and geolocating where the new areas of control are. But it's pretty clear that the Ukrainians are on the run in Donetsk, and any hope of a counteroffensive is completely out the window, because they just simply don't have the capability, the numbers to do that. That's, even if they had the weaponry, they just don't have the manpower, and they don't have the professional manpower to do that. As regards Kursk, they went in there with professional manpower, and the majority of that professional manpower is now been eliminated or neutralized. So it's really has been a complete debacle all the way around. So until the next time, I want to thank everyone for subscribing, liking, and listening to my videos, my audio messages, I should say. And there will be more coming here shortly. Thanks very much, everyone.